Welcome back to another episode of Film East Chats. My name is Shelby Cook, programmer and editor-in-chief at Film East, and today I'm joined by my fellow programmers Neve Brooke, Sarah Lapanova, Will Schofield, and Alex Smith to discuss Emerald Fennell's 2020 film Promising Young Woman. This segment is part of Film East, a Norwich-based young film programmers group supported by Reel Connections. Please note that our discussion today does contain conversations on sexual assault, mental illness, self-harm, abuse, and much more, which may be very triggering to certain listeners. So viewer discretion is advised while continuing on with the rest of this episode. So you will notice that this episode is a special full-length episode of Film East Chats because of the very nature of the conversation that we are going to be having today. Our programmers do dive into some challenging conversations in today's episode, and we really wanted to be able to give the space and the time to elaborate on our thoughts and opinions about this film. This is a very exciting episode for us because we really enjoyed recording it, and we enjoyed the process of the critical response to Emerald Fennell's film and being able to discuss openly our opinions on it and have a debate about how we viewed the themes and the ideas projected in this film. So without further ado, here is Film East Chat's Promising Young Woman.
Let's begin. We're going to use this opportunity as an exercise in criticism. And I think this is very exciting because I personally believe that all art should be criticized. So I think this is going to be a very interesting debate that we're going to have about art and its place in society. So let's get started. I guess we should start with what everyone thought of the film initially. So the first time I watched it, I will admit, I came into the movie with a bias because I had seen the marketing, and I think the marketing really let the film down, and it represented it in a way that wasn't necessarily what it was. So I came into the film with the sort of initial bias of what I thought the film was going to be. But I think the first time I watched it, I enjoyed it more than trying to rewatch the second time. The second time I tried to watch it, I got so angry that I had to rage quit the movie because I was just so mad at it. So I think the second time watching it was not as enjoyable as the first time.
I had a very similar experience to you with the marketing. I was aware of the film for a while, and then my friends showed me this film, and it was very much telling a story of kind of a different type of revenge thriller, one where actual violence is involved and using, sexual assault as a justification for violence. And I was just like, this is wild. This isn't the feminism I'm in for. This is gratuitous. And so I went in with that bias as well. And I had heard really good things about it. I was like, what is everyone on about? This is obscene. And I left being like, I'm a fool. I'm a grade A fool. It's not that at all. There are issues in the film, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But for such bizarre marketing, it's a film that opens a lot of discussions, criticizes a lot of people. And I think it's not great, not, life-changing, but I think it's very, very good.
And I think you're right. You did put that in your notes, Neve, about it opens up conversations and allows you to start thinking about these things. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're having a
Cheers, Emerald.
Yeah.
I'm very similar with you guys. I saw the marketing material first, and I thought it was just a murder film for something horrible that had happened, but the end results weren't justified. And the misleading in the marketing, I was really not a fan of, because even the start of the film, I feel like the film was made even with the marketing in mind, because the start, especially when she's walking along the road with the donuts and the jam dripping down, and you assume it's blood, and you kind of have to keep watching to actually understand what's happening. That was very misleading. And like you guys, I went into the film with a very different idea of what the end product was. And so when I did watch the film the first time, I came out of it loving it. I had so many thoughts. I kind of didn't really have the time to actually stop and sit and process everything that was happening until I was talking to my mum about the film, and I was saying she should really go and watch it. And she asked me to explain it to her. And as I was sat there trying to explain to my 50-year-old mother, who this film really wouldn't usually fit, I realized there were a lot of issues that upon first viewing hadn't occurred to me. And so I am a very mixed bag, and I'm excited for this discussion because I don't know really where I sit with my opinions, and I think this conversation is really going to hopefully help me figure out my opinion.
Promising young therapy, we like to see it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that is such a good leeway, Alex, into the stylization. So I think one of the things that I had an issue with in this film is how stylized it is. And I feel like the film is sort of reminiscent of like a Tarantino film. And I really don't like Tarantino films. I don't watch them. They make me so angry. I just don't like that man. So I feel like that might be part of my bias of why I don't like it. But do you think the stylization and the aesthetic of the film as sort of this very pink, bubbly, bubblegum, blonde hair, blue eyes, skimpy outfits, does that impact the message or the storytelling do you think that it impacts the message that it's trying to get across?
I think the stylization of it is really clever. And I mean, I'm a sucker for highly like visual stylized films anyway. Personally, like I just adore like lush visuals. I'm not someone really who enjoys like a really gritty kind of realist film. So I was bound to appreciate cinematography regardless of whether I like the film or not. But I think the stylization works really well with the story because it kind of really plays with your perception of what you're getting and how these like men perceive her and how she like kind of fly traps these men into this like fantasy that they think that they're getting, but they're not. And I think that the film's very much doing that with its viewer. You think you're getting something, but you're actually it's packaged very prettily to grab you in, and then you're getting something very different. And I think the themes within the film are quite strong. Like, yeah, I agree that there are some issues with it, but overall, I think it's a really good exploration of like trauma and sexual assault and stuff. So yeah, in my opinion, I think actually the stylization of it was quite smart.
I agree, but I also read the stylization in a completely different way. So Cassie's always got a little bow in her hair, she's got her rainbow nails, she's in little flowery dresses. And I read it as a critique on what a feminist and what a revenge protagonist would look like. Just because, in the media or in films, you see a feminist, she's in a pantsuit, she's telling her, she's the boss, she's classy, she's sophisticated. What does feminism look like? Mm-hmm. Like, you can be a girly girl and disagree with society's treatment of sexual assault survivors. Like, I think it was a really clever costuming design to say she's this incredibly intelligent woman. She was obviously the top of her class at medical school, and she likes rainbow nails. Like, she can be this character and not be punished for it.
Absolutely.
And I thought it was really clever, and it was a really lovely thing to see. Anyone can be a feminist, male or female, and if you like bows, you can wear a bow.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. And I think a lot of the time, people like to see females who dress in frilly dresses and pinks and bows and whatever as like, they infantilize them. And actually she takes a lot of agency in what she does. And whether that's right or wrong is a different issue, but she does take a lot of agency in her life and kind of breaks down the stereotype of her being infantilized through this quiet, almost, like very cutesy style.
I think you guys convinced me on that one. I'll take that one.
I hate the wig that she wears at the end of the film. It makes me sick.
Yeah.
I hate it. I think it is such a gross wig. And then every time I saw it in the marketing, she could have just been blonde. Like that would have made her, sexier. But the wig just looks so dumb. It takes me out of the scene.
And this is what's so this is what's so disgusting about the marketing is when the film came out on DVD, they were sending press packs to all like the journalists and everything that had this wig in the press pack. And it's just like, this is the scene where she gets murdered. And we're saying, oh, let's put this wig on. Let's pretend to be Cassie. It's like, it's trying to set it up for, oh, let's be Cassie for Halloween. Or like, it's that, it just, I don't understand this film. And I don't know if that was the studio that was making those decisions, or if it was just really, really missing the mark and just being.
I think it was a really bad PR team. I think the PR team hadn't fully seen the film and had just seen stills. Because I think a lot of people were like, what's going on? But
I didn't know that, but that's really fucked up.
I think it's really just a shit PR team.
It's a Jennifer's Body kind of situation, isn't it? Where, but that's been vindicated now because that's part of the Criterion collection.
I've seen people on TikTok making like videos of ideas of what to dress up for as Halloween, and they have done Cassie
like the Joker.
Yes, and it's really it kind of, when I saw it, I kind of sat back and I was like, you missed that completely. This is not a whimsical, funny, I'm going to put on a wig and a nurse's outfit.
See, this is what the problem I have is either the messaging just gets so lost in the aesthetic of it, because sure, more mainstream people are watching it, but obviously they're not getting the point if they're going to.
I would say people.
I think that's just people being stupid, because like that whole scene is her like acting like a prostitute for the pleasure of these men. Like she is just putting on a role. So the fact that someone would misinterpret this so intensely is just really strange.
It happens all the time. People used to dress up as sexy handmaids from The Handmaid's Tale.
Yes.
So like people misinterpret stuff.
There's this whole like Lolita movement as well.
Oh God.
No.
So moving more into the narrative and how the narrative is presented, we've been sort of walking around what Cassie does. I guess what are your opinions on her actions? So this is being taken as sort of revenge. So first of all, my issue with it is, one, she's avenging her friend. So she really has never been in the situation that her friend was in. So her friend was the one that was raped and sexually assaulted and sort of pretty much ridiculed by these people in her college. And she's sort of taking it upon herself to be this sort of, Robin Hood character to come in and avenge for her. And then she's like, you said it, Sarah, you said, you're there, she's honey trapping these men into these situations where she's making them believe that she's going to go home with them and she's going to have sex with them and that she's drunk. And then she turns it around and turns it into this moral messaging of saying, you shouldn't do that. Now, I have a lot of problems with this. One, because she is honey trapping them. She very clearly never says yes to anything. And I get that's the point of what she's trying to do, is that she's just going along with what the men are suggesting to do. And she never says yes. She never, says, I want to go home with you. She just sort of gets in the car or the Uber or wherever they're going and just goes with them. But it's the act of pretending to be drunk and pretending to be inebriated in a way that's deceiving the other party in this situation that I really have a problem with. And I feel like, in a way, it is sort of a sexual assault against these men that she's honey trapping. I just feel like it's not the way of going about a situation of talking about sexual assault and rape by essentially sexually assaulting the men in the situation. I just don't feel like it was the appropriate way of communicating that message, especially with the fact that she's deceiving them by pretending to be drunk.
I would argue I don't think the film I don't think the film necessarily views her actions as a good thing. Like, yes, they are to an extent. They deliver a catharsis in the sense that she's taking down these terrible, awful people, but at the same time, I think it does a lot to point out how damaging to herself and others these choices are. Like how it destroys her relationship with Bo Burnham's character, and how like the stuff she does to Alison Brie's character, she kind of almost reverse honey traps her, and then later on we see her character and she is in a complete state. And if you were to kind of look at the film from Alison Brie's perspective, then
Yeah.
it was kind of a similar thing that motivated Cassie's rage in the first place. And there's a scene where because she is motivated by the assault of her best friend years ago, who I believe it is implied who committed suicide, and she meets with that friend's mum, who sits her down and says, this stuff you're doing, it's not good for you, it's harmful, it's damaging. And I'm reminded a lot of kind of Gone Girl to an extent, where you watch it and you watch like the actions of I forgot the female character's name in that, and at first it's kind of like entertaining and interesting watching her do this whole big scenario, but then you kind of take a step back and you realize this is psychopathic, this is not healthy for anyone involved. The ends don't 100% justify the means here, and ultimately what is the purpose? Like, it doesn't change what happened to our friend, it doesn't get back at the people who damaged her, and in the end she dies for it. She's killed, and it's kind of a tragedy in that sense, that she's just kind of, the character's almost on a constant downward spiral. And again, the like bright lights and stylization and badass music and stuff kind of leads to cover it, because you're watching it from her perspective, but you are kind of watching the descent and ultimate death of this character through their actions. And I think in that sense, it's not necessarily saying that what she's doing is correct. It's more, but I also think the thing of whether what she's doing is kind of entrapment is a very difficult and complicated
I mean,
thing altogether and stuff.
I completely agree with that. I don't think the movie is saying that what she's doing is good, but it's also putting a lot onto the audience, for the audience to, I mean, I am all about encouraging the audience to think about what they're watching and what they're consuming. But I feel like it's so subtle in the way that it's trying to communicate these things that it gets lost in this sort of spectacle of, oh my God, look at her. She's like James Bond. She's going and she's tricking all of these men and she's doing her feminist thing. And it presents her as a girl boss. You know, it's very much this, and the issue that I have with it is very much white, straight woman privilege. You know, she can get away with this because she's a pretty white woman. And go ahead.
No, I just find it really interesting, like listening to both of you guys, because I completely see like where everyone is coming from. It is just like, I just find it quite interesting, because like from my perspective, when I was watching it, I didn't even necessarily view it as like a feminist story or something to be considered feminist, like although it's got those themes in it. To me, from the get-go, it was mental health issues, like trauma, like PTSD, and like how your mental health suffers after like a certain event, and then how if you don't seek help, which she hasn't, and you kind of stew in it and deal with it in your own way, how it like literally like tears you apart, and you just kind of keep getting lost in the same cycle of bad choices because you are in a very bad headspace. So that what I took away from it was all very much like centered around mental health and the like repercussions of this big trauma that she's had happened in her life.
And this is the problem that I have with the film, is I don't think it has a direct purpose or a direct message. You know, I don't think it has, people read this film as this sort of girl boss feminist, look at her go film, but the messaging is so lost in itself. It's just trying to do too much all at once. And is it about mental illness? Is it about culture? Is it, all of this other stuff? Go ahead.
I again disagree. What a surprise. We don't really agree on this film. I don't think this film obviously has a lot of themes, but it's a film that's bigger than it is. It's a film that questions the nice guy. It's a film that questions the systemic issues we have with rape culture and how people, even if it's not the police, it's people that let it slide, both male and female. There's not like any real baddie. Well, there is a baddie, but everyone's a baddie in this, including Casey. No one's nice except the nice woman in the coffee shop and her parents. Everyone else is not a good character in this. And the film is a grounding for a discussion. It is a film that was made to open our eyes and be like, Jesus Christ, this is the world we live in. It is made to be a talking point like this. This is what we started with, because there are so many things that it raises that it makes you question your complicitness to this behavior. And have you ever seen that? Have you ever done that? And it makes you, it's harrowing how much it makes you question things. And that's the point. I don't know if it's meant to have an answer. I don't know if it's meant to be a set, arc. It's meant to just make you go, yikes.
Yeah, I agree. And like coming back to visualization and stylization, I think that's the way it's made. It's such a good vehicle for this to be then a big film that's kind of viewed widely and be kind of discussed. Because obviously, if you made this kind of film about all of these themes, but it's more of a indie feminist film, or it's more of like a gritty social realism film, then who's going to watch it? You're not going to get that discussion across such a wide audience. But because it's so it's so fast, it's so lush to visually, and it has those like plot points that even if you think they're not necessarily like healthy or helpful for the discussion, it means that it drives the film along in a really compelling way and in a really watchable way that then makes it a mainstream film and opens those discussions up.
Yeah, I really do see it as this reaction for, there are so many problems in this film. It is very problematic. It is an example of mental health and how a lot of the time people think that rape is this one singular act and it only affects the woman and the poor man whose future could be put at jeopardy for his own actions. But one of my main takeaways was how this one sexual assault has such a domino effect, and it doesn't just affect the unfortunate girl, I think her name was Nina, if I remember correctly. It has this effect on her best friend, her mother, her best friend's parents, her best friend's ultimate relationships with other people. And I think it's this reaction that there are so many women out there who have been screaming for attention on this topic and haven't been heard. And we've gotten to this point where we have to create something which is so reactionary, I think is the right word, because there's been so many films which have tried to do it in a more responsible, calm, collected, intellectual way, and they've just been ignored or thrown away or talked about for a moment and then disregarded. I think this film was necessary because it was this scream that finally held people's attention for more than a second. And yeah, I think sorry, you guys go.
No, I was just agreeing. I was just saying it was made with a mainstream audience in mind, which you can really tell in the film, and it's not a bad thing. It did its job really well in that regard.
And like that's why they brought in Bo Burnham. That's why they have really big names, because they really want as many people to see it as possible. That it wasn't supposed to be for a small group of people. It was meant to be as big as it possibly could be.
I remember. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Will. You're the male. You could speak.
Thank you. I remember when I was watching it, a while ago I read, you know, the movie The Crow with like Brandon Lee. I read the comic of that, and it's really weird because it's not great. It's basically just scenes of, it's like some weird superhero thing where he goes up and beats up a bunch of gang members, and then there's a scene of him writing poetry and committing self-harm, and he goes and beats up more, and it's basically just that and that over and over until it ends. But what's really interesting is it was written by a guy whose girlfriend was killed very suddenly in a drunk driving accident, and he made the comic as a means of trying to like work through his feelings and kind of put his grief and emotions on paper and stuff. And in a lot of ways, when I was kind of reminded of that when watching this, there's very clearly a lot of emotion behind it from the, or at least that's, I mean, it's dangerous to
angry.
speculate on what was going on, but it's a very angry, emotional film. And I remember the Crow's creator actually saying that it was actually really unhelpful to do that because it left him just kind of wallowing in it. And again, I'm not going to make speculations on what the process of this film was like, but yeah, that's kind of the takeaway I got from it. It's clearly very, it's like you said, it was a aggressive explosion scroll of emotion.
And I've read a lot of people who have said that they are happy that this movie is so angry. And so, you know, it's finally just the rage of this collective female hurt, you know, and it's an angry film. But I don't think that because it's angry, I don't think it's getting its point across. I think because it's so angry, and this is what happens when you go into these rages, you're not really you're not really communicating anything. You're just getting it off your chest. You're saying, oh, I hate it when, you know, they value the boys, you know, future over this woman who's now is going to kill herself because she has this trauma of this rape. And it's just so angry. And I just feel like I'm going to say all of these things all at once. And I'm not, you know, it just really doesn't make any sense. And I just don't feel like it was I don't feel like you could have sat down and really constructed something that could have been so much more powerful than just this sort of rage of stuff. It just feels like it tries to pack everything about rape culture all into one and say all of these things. And it just doesn't, I don't think, effectively get that across. Versus something like I May Destroy You. I May Destroy You, I feel like was so much more effective in talking about the nuances of rape culture, because it isn't Michaela Cole isn't afraid to blame herself. She isn't afraid to blame the people around her. It is still very angry, and it's getting this point across that women are angry and we're tired of this happening, but it still very effectively communicates the nuances of, you know, rape culture in many ways is black and white. You shouldn't rape people, but it also communicates, you know, in one scene, you know, Michaela Cole's character learns that taking the condom off while you're having sex is a form of rape, you know, without the consent of the woman. So this partner that she has sex with takes the condom off. She doesn't know. And she goes to, you know, the police station, and she, you know, learns that is a form of rape. And that is an educational thing for many people, because a lot of women don't know that. I know I personally didn't know that. But then also later on in the series, she isn't afraid to blame herself, where she, you know, she's like, oh, I really want my gay friend to hook up with this guy, so I'm going to lock them into my room so that way they have to hook up. And she very much points to herself and saying, this is such a wrong thing to do. You're, you know, essentially pining these two people together. You're locking them into a room, forcing them to, you know, be together when they don't want to do that. And they've said no, and she still continues to do it. And she acknowledges that was wrong of her to do that. And so I feel like I May Destroy You in many ways captures and I May Destroy You is actually quite beautiful in terms of it's very bright, it's very colorful, it has a lot of those things that A Promising Young Woman has, but it just communicates the message of the nuances of rape culture so much more effectively than Promising Young Woman. And I just don't feel like it truly thought about the implications of what it was saying. I think it has such bad impacts on, you know, especially with the culture of blaming women, you know, for crying rape, right? Because so many people, especially with men, like we see this with the Me Too movement. It's all, oh, well, that's one woman saying that against someone, you know, he was a good man. And I get that's the point of what the film's trying to get, but it's also essentially showing this woman who is going around crying rape, you know, and putting herself into these situations where she is going to get raped and is going to get, you know, murdered. And it's showing, and it's just furthering this narrative that women are psychos and they're making this stuff up. You know, that's the issue. That is the core issue I have with this film. I think it's so irresponsible in the way that it depicts women's reality of rape culture. With Cassie doing what she does, it's just furthering this narrative that women are making this up. And that's what the issue I have with it is.
I think, yes, she lies, but I think the film is more about the dangers that our society in not fixing this issue has. She, like you say, she never says yes to anything. These men take her home and are going to have sex with her. It's showing how dangerous these situations are. And if you are in that state, like she says, it's not Nina's fault she was drunk. It's not Nina's fault that she had something slipped into her drink, but it's dangerous to be a woman. And I want to talk about the scene. We're running out of time. The death scene. She went to that fully aware. She had a contingency plan. She was fully aware she could die. She's so traumatized. She's so hell-bent on this that she needs to do this. She's not a good character, but she needs to do this. And the death scene, when he puts his knee on her throat, holds a pillow over her, and you hear her muffled screams for 2.5 minutes. It's harrowing. Because quite often in films, women are, you know, murdered to further the plot. You know, James Bond, in all those films, they're gone. You see it for 2 seconds and he moves on. This is a woman. This is a human being deliberately murdered. And it makes you realize that. And for the rest of the film, you don't see her face anymore because she's not there. She's lost that part of herself. She's no longer the promising young woman. She's just a corpse. And I think it just shows how dangerous it can be. And if we don't solve these issues, more situations like this are going to happen. And in the times we're living in at the moment, when the dangers of our society are so prevalent, I think it's heavy-handed and a bit sloppy in places, but the discussions that it raises to people who aren't as clued up on indie television and cinema could be really, really impactful. Not everyone is as geeky as us when it comes to film and TV. And if it means that it raises a discussion between a couple or some parents with their teenage children, I'm all for it. Even if it's a bad discussion, they're talking about it and people are understanding that men and women have really problematic issues about rape culture in society and people are dying for it. And it needs to change. So that's how I view the film. Yes, it's a bit sloppy, and I May Destroy You, it's brilliant. It is so brilliant, but they're two very different things. I May Destroy You is a more emotional story about the internal turmoil that happens to someone as a result of sexual assault, whereas Promising Young Woman is more of a, this is what's happening. Fix it. Let's talk about it. We need to get this done. And it's also got Bo Burnham, token nice guy. He's not the nice guy. It tricks you because people you trust, because people around us, you don't know what people have done or are capable of. And it's a very clever casting and everything. I just think, it's not I know I don't think it should have won the Oscar. The script wasn't that great, but I think for as a discussion piece, as a mainstream film on Sky Cinema, you know, come on, this is great.
Yeah, I agree. I do think it serves its purpose as in starting conversations, and obviously we're the example of that here because we're having a conversation. You know, it is really sad, and I feel like, and in a way, I kind of feel like this film is just, it doesn't. I mean, I do appreciate like what you said, Neve, about it really focusing on her, this torture that she went through when she dies. But I feel like the rest of the film is just so whimsical, especially with the design of it, that it doesn't really take it seriously, that this is something women do get murdered for not having sex with men. I mean, men will go, especially this is a real epidemic here in America, is if a woman turns a guy down, he'll come and shoot her. Like that happens all the time with these, you know, the availability of guns, you know, men can't take that their ego being hit, so they just go and kill the woman. And this is, I think, an issue that I have with the film as well, is it just sort of takes the real repercussions of women being murdered by men, and it doesn't take it very seriously. And it's sort of, go ahead.
Well, I kind of agree in the aspect that she had the contingency plan. Originally, Emerald Fennell, is it Fennell? Fennell.
Yeah.
She wrote the script, just the final scene of them burning her body.
And I feel like
she said Cassie would know that if she was going to do this, there was no way she could fight this guy herself. So that's why she made the contingency plan. But like you said, the sort of whimsy, I would say there's no whimsy in that scene. It's a brown log cabin. There's khaki everywhere. It is a masculine space she's in that time. And the whimsy's gone. There's no music. There's no, you know, badass track playing. It is, you know, it's traumatic. And the violent part of the film that's actually affecting women is played straight, not even a score, just played straight. So I would say that the important moments, the impactful moments are played with like a level of respect rather than like, she's a badass woman.
Yeah. But does it get lost in the fact that it's surrounded by all of this, the rest of this girl boss energy?
I would say it makes it more stark.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like we talked at the beginning, I think it's kind of, it is a beautifully like visual film, but I don't think that dumbs the film down, and I don't think it dumbs down what it's trying to say. So yeah. But
then this is another issue that I've thought about. Who is the audience for this film? Like that's what I feel. Is it trying to get to men to say, oh wow, this is like really terrible, this is what happens to women? Is it trying to communicate this message to men? Is it trying to just talk to women? Who is this film meant for? Because I'm a woman who has experienced sexual assault, and I didn't find this film cathartic in any sort of way. I actually was like, I really don't like this film. And I think that it doesn't give justice to what how sexual assault actually is in real life. So who is this film made for? I mean, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that.
It might actually have been made for not victims, because the whole point of the film is for people who've never experienced sexual assault. It doesn't mean anything to them.
Yeah.
So it actually was probably made for common Joe who doesn't really know anything about it, and it doesn't mean anything to them, to actually take that step back and be like, oh God, just because this hasn't happened to me, this is still an issue that's going on. And that's a really interesting reaction. Like that, I hadn't thought that, but that is probably what it was made for.
But yeah, I think the issue that I have with it is people just herald it as this perfect film, and it has so many issues. And I think people miss the point of it, that, you know, and this is what I was trying to say at the very beginning, is art should be criticized. You know, we can like this film, and inherently I did like this film. I didn't have an issue with it the first time I watched it. Like the second time I watched it, I was much more angry towards it, but I inherently don't think this is a terrible film. Like, I've watched worse films in my life, but I think art deserves to be criticized. And I think the issue with this film in particular was critics weren't criticizing it. They were just saying,
Yeah.
oh, this is perfect. This is the greatest film of all time. But, you know, it deserves, we can still say it's a good film, but here's the issues with it that it's having.
Oh yeah, it definitely has issues. I mean, the second I finished the film, I went to my friend, it needed another good male character. Because we have the dad and Dr. Octopus, I don't know what his actual name is, but Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2, he is, you know, he gets his redemption arc. He was a lawyer who used to bully victims and he gets redemption. But, you know, besides that, every other bloke in it is corrupt, and that's not feminism, because not every the nice guy, not everyone is corrupt. Like,
I quite liked. Sorry to jump in. I quite like that they didn't use Bo Burnham as a way for her to then like magically get better, and like, you know, her emotional state and her mental health state would get better and she would kind of move on, which is kind of when he was introduced as a character and they seemed to have this connection and they started dating, I was just like, I'm a bit worried that's what's going to happen, because then I agree with you guys. I don't think the script is perfect. I don't think the film definitely has some issues, but I'm quite happy with what they've done and how they've handled it. And I think it had more impact and more conversations to be had that way, as opposed to if they've just used, you know, Bo Burnham as like she meets this really nice guy and he helps her get over the trauma of her friend dying and being sexually assaulted, and like everything is okay now. And actually what happened has been a lot more like dramatic and intense, and I think it makes people think a lot. So yeah, I really love it as a conversation piece.
Well, I think it's a great conversation piece because of its imperfections. And I think as a society, we're always looking for this perfect fix to a problem, but we have to try and remember every person is different and every person's experience is different. And so this film, yes, does have a lot of issues, but I think that's important because it maybe encourages to think deeper about the problem and consider the fact that there won't be a perfect solution. And as a society, we need to figure out how we can have multiple conversations without telling someone that they're wrong or they're right. There needs to be an adaptable way forward which is ready to see and hear different people's coping mechanisms and experiences and ways that they want to go forward. And I think having these imperfections is encouraging this discussion, which is encouraging us to see the different the different angles and variations that this problem can have.
That was so beautifully put. Oh my God.
That felt like a blur of words to me.
Because what I think this entire podcast, we've all agreed pretty much, but it's just different interpretations. And that is cinema, you know, that is what it's for. And it's just, you know, I love when films can do this.
And that's what I was trying to say at the beginning is, you know, and this is how I feel about things should be inherently criticized. Just because you love something and you think something's really great, it still has room to be criticized. You can still say, oh, it still has negative sides to it. And that is really you saying, I really love this. Like, I really love David Bowie, but I can still acknowledge that he had issues with appropriating Black culture, appropriating Japanese culture. And I can still criticize the issues that he had as an artist, you know, but
I really agree. Criticism is so important because how can we go forward and correct and reevaluate? Like, if you're not willing to criticize something, you haven't understood it, because it's accepting that something should stay the way it is instead of thinking, how can we make it better for everybody? It feels lazy to me to not. But I think one of the best things this film probably has done is, and I mean, we have to wait to see if what I'm about to say will actually happen, but I think one of the best things that this film has done has reopened a door, and hopefully we're going to get more films and TV that will address this subject, hopefully as bravely as this film has, and hopefully more responsibly. Because I do agree, it is a bit all over the place, but I really hope that it's been this big bomb that is going to have outpouring of more conversation and more media. And I'm really hoping, even though it is problematic, it is going to eventually have a really positive, what's the word? Outcome or
Impact.
Yeah.
This is sort of the outcome that we're starting to see are these types of films. And Promising Young Woman is a reactionary piece, and I May Destroy You is a reactionary piece too. People being more open now about sexual assault, particularly within entertainment and within society in general.
I think definitely what you've all said is very true. I think the film in and of itself, it's a good film and I enjoy it a lot. I don't 100% think it was deserving of all the accolades it got.
No.
But I think at its core it's good. And I think similar to what you said, a lot of its value will probably come in the future when we look back on this time and this kind of moment, because I think it's very much of its moment in time. And I think, like you said, it's very controversial and inflammatory, and trying to drive up the current cultural discussion and stuff that's still ongoing, and it's kind of making a point about that. And so when we reach a point where we are, because I'm not 100% sure we are post Me Too, in a sense, like the fallout from that is still very much coming, and there's new stuff going on all the time. But at a point in the future where things have died down and moved on, either through positive change or simply people just stop talking about it, I think being able to look back at this as kind of a moment in history will be incredibly important and interesting. And it's almost doesn't, the quality of the film and all these kind of individual issues almost fall away in terms of like what it is saying about what it says about this moment in time and culture.
Yeah, and that's partially why I really appreciate that it is heavy-handed, because I think I prefer it to be bold and to try to be brave, and kind of go in on it in its full force, as opposed to try to hold back and tiptoe around the issues, and then the impact wouldn't have been there at all in terms of, the result of the film. So yeah, although we've all agreed that it's a bit sloppy, like I really appreciate about how like forceful it has been with what it was trying to say, and I agree, I think it's going to be like really valuable in the future, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Hopefully you have been enlightened by the conversation today. I wouldn't necessarily say enjoyed. If you're interested in reading different perspectives on Promising Young Women and how other people understood the film, you can head over to our website and read an article by one of Filmy's regular contributor, Jessica Ann Evangelista, who looks at the feminist revenge thriller and compares Promising Young Women to films like Jennifer's Body, which is something that was alluded to in the conversation that we had earlier. If you are interested in contributing to our film and television blog like Jessica, you can visit our website, film-east.com/submissions for more information. To learn more about Film East and the Young Film Programmers, visit our website, film-east.com, or follow us on any of our social medias at films_east. Again, this has been an episode of Film East Chats from Film East, a Norwich-based young film programmer group supported by Reel Connections and part of the Film Hub Southeast and the BFI Fan Network.